We can now turn to panel 1, which is Hizmet and Resilience in the post-2016 era. So we have Elise LoBue and Julia Nash will present Salutogensis and a Strong Sense of Coherence, Hizmet Refugees, Resilience in Canada.
Hello, good morning. Thank you. Thank you for having us. We are very glad to be with you all today, presenting our work, Salutogenesis and Strong Sense of Coherence, Hizmet Refugees, Resiliency in Canada. And before continuing, we also want to echo and offer our thoughts and prayers to all of those impacted by the devastating earthquake, including the Hizmet-affiliated victims who reports indicate continue to be targeted, detained, and treated poorly by police and government officials even during this tragedy. So our thoughts and prayers are with them all. My name is Dr.Elise LoBue, and I'm with the University of Illinois, Springfield. I am an anthropologist by training, but I currently work in an interdisciplinary honors program called the Capital Scholars Honors Program.
I'm Julia Nash. I'm a sophomore at University of Illinois, Springfield. I'm also a part of the honors program. I am a psychology major. I do have a strong interest in social sciences, however. So when Dr. LoBue asked if I wanted to be a research assistant, I gladly accepted.
So before getting to our project, I wanted to provide a bit of background on how we came into this research. So I was first introduced to the Hizmet movement in 1996 when I was a Peace Corps volunteer teaching at a university in Shymkent, Kazakhstan. And I had a number of Hizmet students in my classes, and I was the supervisory teacher for this group of lovely Hizmet Turkish women you can see in the photo. And I was their supervisory teacher, and I worked with Hizmet middle and high schools during their practice teaching and some of their clinical hours. I had a number of students I visited in Turkey in the late 90s who came to me in the United States. But in February 2017, a particularly close family of friends came to stay with us in the US in Springfield, Illinois, before preparing for their border crossing into Canada to seek political asylum. And it was during their stay that I witnessed, their planning. I heard a number of border crossing stories about people coming from the US into Canada for asylum, and I even helped them with some of their preparations. And so from this personal connection, I became even more concerned about and interested in Hizmet stories, particularly those seeking political asylum. And so I followed my family friends to Canada, so to speak, as an academic. So just briefly, an overview of the project I'm working on. It began in late 2018, and then as many of us, it was interrupted by COVID and reinstituted in 2021. And it's very much still a work in progress and an ongoing project. And we consider ourselves to be in some of the earlier stages of data analysis. But in a nutshell, this research is story gathering. So I'm an anthropologist, and I'm interviewing Hizmet refugees in Canada to understand how and why they came to Canada for political asylum. It's very ground up research. It started, as I mentioned, with my personal connection to family friends and my concern from them. And so the main focus of this research is people. It's an ongoing project, as I mentioned, where so far we've conducted 20 semi-structured interviews with Hizmet members with conventional refugee status, which is very important, which means that they're very securely in Canada, in the Ontario province of various age groups, professional backgrounds, genders, family situations, etc. And so when sharing information and research findings, all of the interviewees remain anonymous, and any key identifying factors have been removed. And I was very fortunate this semester to undertake a research assistant.
So this graph here shows the amount of refugees that have entered Canada from Turkey since 2013. As we can see, it starts relatively low, and then of course the coup in 2016, we see a spike, and then the pandemic of course shut everything down, so there's a drop. But through September 2022, there has been an immense spike of refugees coming in from Turkey. Some interviews that we've conducted have reported that roughly 80% of Turkish and Kurdish refugees in Canada just so happen to be Hizmet. From the interviews conducted thus far, we have observed an immense amount of bravery from an impressive group of people that actively demonstrate what we are calling salutogenesis.
So through the stories of the people I've interviewed and met from Hizmet over the years, I've been struck by the overall positive life outlook of Hizmet refugees I've interviewed, despite having undergone some very harrowing and terrible past circumstances and experiences. And this idea of resiliency and adaptability and maintaining very strong skill sets has also struck me, despite the various countries and situations in which the refugees have been. And last summer, I read an article by an anthropologist named Brianne Wenning, and her article was on asylum seekers in the Gambia and the UK, and it gave my thoughts and interpretations of Hizmet resiliency and adaptability a framework and a name, and that is salutogenesis, and more specifically, sense of coherence. And so literally salutogenesis means origins of health, but we're looking at it here as a scholarly orientation focusing attention on the study of the origins of health and assets for health, contrary to the origins of disease and risk factors. And it's most associated with Aaron Antonovsky's 1979 Health, Stress, and Coping. And doing some more research on salutogenesis, I've learned that it's actually been used quite widely across multiple disciplines to look for a more positive understanding of the human experience. And as you can see in this graph up here, my experiences in the interviews is that in terms of a continuum of health, despite having, again, undergone some very harrowing situations, all of my refugee informants were, I would say, definitely more on the healthy, on the right-hand blue side of this spectrum in terms of health and disease. And so in part of this model, there's this idea of sense of coherence, which is the green circle in the middle. And that, I think, is really important when thinking about Hizmet refugees in Canada. So a sense of coherence is defined as a generalized orientation toward the world, which perceives it on a continuum, as the model showed, as comprehensible, manageable, and meaningful. And a person or a group with a strong sense of coherence possesses the desire and motivation to cope, which is meaningfulness, conceives of a challenge or a situation as understandable, comprehensibility, and believes that there are coping resources available, which is manageability. And the strength of one or a group's sense of coherence is a significant factor in facilitating the movement towards health. So from our interviews, we're contending that the senses of resiliency and adaptability found among Hizmet refugees in Canada derive largely from a strong sense of coherence fostered by work within Hizmet in the past that has allowed members to view life as Canadian refugees as more comprehensible, manageable, and meaningful. And a strong sense of coherence has perhaps helped them with an easier integration than some other refugee groups. And this interpretation is certainly not intended to minimize the harm and danger that many of the refugees and Hizmet members have fled and endured to come to Canada, and nor does it discount or try to romanticize the stressful transitions from steady jobs and lifestyles and what was previously strong structural and economic support from Hizmet to now some new challenges and uncertainties and struggles. But rather, using a salutogenic model points to refugees' strong sense of coherence and skill set for resiliency, adaptability, and overall well-being. And the strong sense of coherence is the result of what is known in the salutogenic model as generalized resistance resources.
So generalized resistance resources are any characteristics of the person, group, or the environment that can facilitate effective tension management. Like stated, we looked at where the generalized resistance resources are present in Hizmet refugees' self, group, and environment. Thus far, there has been a significant pattern of the Hizmet people's mindsets, life approaches that originates from the movement's philosophy, including service, inclusiveness, dialogue building, and civil society engagement. It ultimately encourages meaningful interactions with the communities in which they inhabit. So the first general resistance resource we focus on is the individual characteristics of each person. So we have their belief in God. So each of these quotes, each of these quotes have a different perspective on how religion plays a role into these people's realities. We have from zero to up, this is a test from God, and immigration for the sake of God. What is similar in all these quotes is like I mentioned, the hope as well as the acknowledgement that they know that they did nothing wrong to be in the current situation they are in, and this is all a part of God's plan. Okay. And next we have education and language. So this quote from a woman in her early 30s highlights the positive impact education and language provided through the Hizmet has had on herself and others. So she states, our education positively affects us. We know how to do research. We know how to set up our plans. So therefore, they just know how to be much more resourceful in any condition they are in. And speaking English gives them stability, especially in countries such as Canada, where that is the main language. Additionally, we have travel experience. So this quote, this woman said, the Hizmet movement helped them, quote, become like chameleons, which she positively highlights the adaptability that the Hizmet movement provides. Living in many different countries makes coming to Canada a more so comfortable experience because people of Hizmet are adapted to being immersed into so many different cultures. This, of course, aids in their sense of coherence as they can make sense of their surroundings and go from there. And of course, we are collecting this assumption from those who have traveled a lot through Hizmet and been abroad frequently, and not those who have come directly from Turkey.
So generalized resistant resources not only are found in individuals, but also as a group. So membership in a group can provide characteristics that can facilitate tension management and allow for challenges and life to be seen as just more meaningful, comprehensible, and manageable. And in this case, we're looking at the structural and ideological characteristics of Hizmet as they manifest themselves into solid, generalized resistance resources for integration into Canada as a refugee. And so one of the first things that we're talking about here is just structural affiliation with Hizmet as a generalized resistance resource. And you can see here from this quote, a woman in her early 30s, I think that Hizmet people are adjusting to life easier than other refugees. We have our community and we help each other. We will host each other when we come. Hizmet people help each other explain processes of refugee claims, etc. And people who came 2 years ago tell the newcomers about their experiences and the mistakes they made. Another illustrative example that we found in the research is of Roxham Road. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Roxham Road, but it is a road that runs between the US and Canada. It starts in Pennsylvania and it ends in Canada. And my family friends, before crossing the border, had the number of the Somalian taxi driver they were supposed to call. They knew how many steps it would take them between the United States and Canada. They knew what to respond to the officers when they were told that they were breaking the law, et cetera, et cetera. And a number of my interviewees actually crossed into Canada via Roxham Road. And a group of siblings told me that when they reached the shelter in Montreal after being processed, there was a group of Turkish people waiting for them. And as one said, quote, it felt as though you had arrived at a Hizmet movement event. So sharing information about successful border crossings at Roxham Road helped make a very stressful and monumental event seem more comprehensible, manageable, and meaningful. And the structural affiliation with Hizmet as a generalized resistance resource goes beyond helping and offering assistance. The ideology of service and interacting with the world and new places is also important. So a number of interviewees talked about what, quote, doing Hizmet looks like when oftentimes they were accustomed to going to other places and setting up schools and hospitals and charities, et cetera, and now they themselves find they are a refugee. And dialogue and internal service of Hizmet kept coming up in the interviews. You can see here, we get into dialogue with many kinds of people. This is our strength in Hizmet. The dialogue part is important from Hizmet. Thank you. To help them adjust, not just the people. This is the only Hizmet my mother can do here, spoken by a woman whose mother did not speak English. And then the best way for doing Hizmet is to serve those who have served before. So this is this idea of internal Hizmet, doing service for each other when you can't necessarily do Hizmet in the way in which they had done before. So the ideology of service and dialogue is important for a group generalized resistance resource.
Lastly, we looked at the environment aspect of generalized resistance resources. Canada was a sensible choice for many because it's immigrant friendly, there are many social benefits, and it is very accepting, as we can see from this tweet from Justin Trudeau. He said, "Those fleeing persecution, terror, and war, Canadians will welcome you. Regardless of your faith, diversity is our strength." In contrast, the Trump era, around the same time as the coup, also included the Muslim ban. And so, of course, that's a less accepting environment for those looking to seek asylum. And this picture is Trump with the Turkish president as well, which also does not send the most inviting message. Additionally, Europe has an unstable environment when it comes to the treatment of not only Muslims, but refugees as well. From one interview, this man who came from Europe to Canada said that when he entered Canada, he went to a bank and saw a woman with a hijab working, and immediately he knew he made the right choice because he saw diversity in some place as simple as a bank. So this all creates, of course, a stronger sense of coherence for the Hizmet people. It is easier to integrate confidently into a place where you are accepted and given support, which therefore increases meaningfulness, comprehensibility, and manageability of their current situation.
So, by way of concluding thoughts, just coming back to this idea of sense of coherence as a global orientation that expresses the extent to which one has a pervasive, enduring though dynamic feeling of confidence that one's internal and external environments are predictable, and that there is a high probability that things will work out as well as can reasonably be expected. And we've seen this manifest in our interviewees' lives in many ways, including easy readiness to work different jobs, often beneath their education or professional qualifications, quick completion of paperwork and application, enrollment in new jobs and trainings, strong willingness to share information and resources with each other, as I indicated, and in general, an overarching positive attitude and sense of gratitude. So Hizmet, its background, structure, and ideology has transferred into an experience of significant generalized resistance resources in our interviews, some of which we outlined here, which has led to an overall strong sense of coherence that has allowed interviewees, despite past and continued persecution of Hizmet members, to see their lives in Canada as refugees as comprehensible, manageable, and meaningful. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Dr.